Yeah. Can you have me loud voice? I nominate Councillor Diana van der Koot. She's extremely suitable for the position, and I think she'll do a super job. Thank you.
And do we have a seconder? I'm going to second it. All right, then I'll do a second it. Anybody else? Any more nominations? No. If you're all in agreement, I'll therefore elect Councillor van der Koot as chairman of the Standards Committee. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, thank you very much for electing me as your chair. It is a great honour to serve this committee. And I should also like to express thanks to our previous chairman, Brian Donnelly, who was a steady and expert hand at the helm of this committee for a good many years. And we shall miss his experience and knowledge on the committee. I'd also like to welcome everyone who is attending this newly constituted committee at the start of this municipal year. Looking around, I think most of us are old hands, either immediately on the past committee or previously. I think Trish, you were a past chairman of the committee. Yes. And I think we just have one completely new member, which is Joan Gregg. So very special welcome to you on the committee. I'd also like to welcome back our independent persons, so John Donaldson and our parish council representatives, Philip Baxter and Stephen Walker, who are our much valued co-opted advisory members on the committee. This committee is charged under the Constitution with discharging the matters set out in the Localism Act 2011, Chapter 7, and any regulations made under them, which is to promote and maintain high standards of conduct by members, and that includes members of the parish councils and neighbourhood councils which are in our district. I'd also like to welcome those who are attending via the internet. The meeting is being live streamed on the council's YouTube channel and recorded. Before we proceed, I just have to remind those present where the fire exits are, which are there and there, and also to remind everyone to ensure that their mobile devices are switched off or on mute. So that deals with the first item on the agenda, which was the election of chairman. Moving on to item 2, we have apologies for absence. I've just been given apologies by Peter Burgess. Do we have any other apologies?
So I have received apologies, as you've just mentioned, from Peter Burgess and also Michael Rumble.
Right. Thank you. So we now move on to item 3, which is appointment of vice chairman. And I should like to propose Peter Burgess, who we've spoken to. He's agreeable to stand as vice chair, although unfortunately he's not able to be present at the meeting today. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Thank you, Kate. Are there any other proposals for vice chair? Then could I please have a show of hands for Peter Burgess as vice chairman? I think that's a vote in favour. Of course, our independent persons and parish council reps don't have a vote.
Is Joan voting? Is she voting? I've got nothing to base on.
Right. So you're abstaining. Thank you. But I think that's a majority in favour. Thank you. So I duly declare that Peter Burgess is vice chairman of the committee. We now move on to item 4, which is to approve the time of meetings of the committee for the ensuing year. As most of us know who've been on the committee, historically the meetings have been held at 10 o'clock. Is everybody happy with that to continue? Yeah, good. I think the only problem I found this morning was just trying to park in the car park, but that's just a problem of being, you know, having a meeting in the morning when everybody's here in the office. And we have meetings scheduled throughout the year for the 14th of September, the 30th of November and the 15th of March 2023. So those will be at 10 o'clock. Moving on to item 5, that is to approve as correct the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 16th of March 2022, which was circulated with the agenda. Is everyone happy for me to sign those as correct? Yes?
Yeah.
Sign those again.
Okay, Councillor Grech emailed me the other day with an amendment, and that has been rectified before the meeting. Okay, so the minutes you'll be signing are the correct record.
And what was the correction?
The correction was with regards to SC 26, and there was an error with regards to we've got Steyning councillors, 8 code of conduct complaints against Steyning councillors were received in 2019, 15 complaints in 2020 and 26 complaints in 21. But just so you are aware, the correct record of minutes has been changed.
Well spotted, Councillor. Correct, thank you very much. So I'll sign those at the end.
We will sign those at the end,
Yeah,
yes.
thank you.
Yeah.
So moving on to item 6, are there any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. Thank you. Moving on to item 7, we come to announcements. First of all, announcements from the chairman of the committee. As chairman, I'd like to make a brief announcement, and that is the sad news that Mrs. Mary Burrows, who was the senior clerk to Slinfold Parish Council, sadly passed away on Thursday, the 2nd of June. She was known by some members of this committee and in fact was due to run a dog show with Councillor Utan on Sunday, the 5th of June as part of the Slinfold Jubilee festivities. And I'm sure that members of this committee will want to join in sending their sincerest condolences to her husband, Tony. Yes. Oh, Friday, the 3rd of June. Thank you. Thank you. I haven't received any announcements from the Chief Executive, and I'd just like to ask the Monitoring Officer if she'd like to make any announcements.
I have not so much a formal announcement, but just to let the committee know and the chairman know that it's actually Liz's birthday today, our Democratic Services Officer.
Happy birthday.
So wish her happy birthday.
That's a very important announcement.
Absolutely.
Happy birthday. So we now move on to item 8, which is to consider a verbal report of the monitoring officer in relation to an update on the review and support for Steyning Parish Council, which is being provided by Hoey and Scott Associates Limited. Just by way of introduction to this item, I think most of us are aware that complaints relating to Steyning Parish Council, which are mainly councillor against councillor, have for a number of years been taking an ever increasing amount of time of this council's monitoring officer and our legal and democratic services. 70% of the complaints in the past 3 years related to Steyning, 80% of the time of the department, and the cost has been taken up, and the cost was estimated at £65,000 per year of our public money. This was considered to be disproportionate, given that Steyning is just one parish council out of 35 parish and neighbourhood councils in the district. Under the complaints procedure, which we adopted last year, this committee can resort to any appropriate action to resolve complaints matters. So this committee decided at its meeting on the 16th of March, the last meeting, following contact between the monitoring officer and Stenning Parish Council, to instruct Hoey Anscoff Associates Limited to work with Stenning Parish Council to try to improve matters by conducting a review into the internal disputes and infighting in that council. Hoey Anscoff have considerable expertise in standards in the public life arena. The committee also resolved to suspend any further action on the outstanding complaints pending this alternative resolution. And the council subsequently approved a budget of £20,000 to meet the cost of the review. So I'd now like to invite the monitoring officer to update this committee on how the review is proceeding.
And thank you, Chairman. That was a really good introduction. So with regard to the review and the action that this committee and myself as the monitoring officer has decided to take, it's been seen as rather radical, and it's come with, there has been some hesitancy and reluctance, but we think we have everybody on board. We're certainly hoping that that is the case. What this, it's important for members that weren't here on the committee before, just to point out what we're hoping to achieve from this review. And as the chairman has already said, you know, we were investing around about £20,000 to enable this review to happen. So what we're hoping the review, what the aim of there's 5 aims of this review. And these are, and I will go through them quite quickly. But again, just to remind ourselves, the process will review Stenning Parish Council's processes and procedures to ensure they have the right tools and that those tools are in place to allow the council to operate effectively. They're going to have a look at trying to understand what the council's underlying issues are and help the council to consider how they can work more effectively together. They are going to help the council's reputation through ensuring that there is a culture of high standards and good governance, to also ensure there is a good understanding of the different roles of members and roles of officers too, and that they can both do their jobs effectively together. And then finally, they hope to develop an action plan to help the council resolve its difficulties and allow Stenning and Horsham to monitor progress over time. So that's what our money is being spent on. The main thing that I wanted to do was update the committee to say that it has started. The review has started. They've had questionnaires. They sent questionnaires out to all of the parish councillors, but also to other interested parties. So some of those being residents and ex-councillors. They've had the questionnaires in, they're saying, most of them, and they've already started analysing them. And they are also booked to do their face-to-face interviews on Thursday. So next Thursday, they will be travelling down on Wednesday, but starting the face-to-face interviews on Thursday. So it's happening, which is really, really good for me to be able to report to the committee that it is in process. Next Thursday. So next Thursday, it will be the 23rd. So they arrive here on the 22nd, and then they start the face-to-face interviews on the 23rd. Thank you, Chair.
Is that with the councillors or with any other individuals?
That's face-to-face with the councillors and the officers as well, for parish council.
Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask or any comments they'd like to make about the review?
I think so.
Yes, Kate. No. Oh, right. I was just going to ask whether we've got any idea of when the final report, I know it's early days at the moment and there's a lot of work still to be done, but when the final report might come to this committee.
Thank you, Chairman. I thought that question may come up actually. So we have gone through our correspondence and we do have a date for the end of July. I think that is a little bit optimistic because it's taken a bit more time than I think anticipated with regard to the filling in of the questionnaires and getting everybody on board. So I think, and hopefully I'm not being too optimistic, but we are hoping for sometime in August. Thank you, Chairman.
So on that basis, we might have a report by our next meeting on the 14th of September.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Sharon, for that that update. Yes. Yeah.
Just as a supplementary to that question, that in the last minutes of the meeting, it was noted that the contents of the report, plus there was going to the new code of conduct, was 3 councillors had not adopted them. Is Steyning Parish Council one of them?
Chairman, if I could, I don't know the answer to that. If I could hand over to Robert. The answer.
I can confirm that Steyning Parish Council have adopted the new code of conduct.
Right, so it's not one of the 3 that's not adopted it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I think we're just asked to consider the report. So I think we've considered it, and unless anyone's got any further questions on that, we'll await with great interest the report from Hoey and Scoff, and hopefully we'll be able to consider that at our next meeting in September. So I'm going to move on now to agenda item 9, which is to consider the government's response to the Committee on Standards in Public Life's review of local government ethical standards, which was published in January 2019. And this, what we're considering is the response as set out in the report from the Head of Democratic Services and Monitoring Officer. Just by way of introduction, I'll just say that the Committee on Standards in Public Life reviewed the structure, processes and practice in relation to ethical standards in local government and how they can be improved. And that report was published in January 2019. They included best practice recommendations, many of which we have adopted in our Code of Conduct and Complaints Procedure, which were both reviewed last year, that's 2021. What we're dealing with under this agenda item is the government's long-awaited response, published in March 2022, so a few months ago, to the recommendations directed by the committee in January 2019, that's the Committee on Standards in Public Life, to government as requiring legislative changes. And I'm going to, now I think I've got that right, haven't I? And I'm going to ask the Monitoring Officer to run through the main points of her report, which we've read attached to the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You've done a really good introduction and background for me, so that's fantastic. This report that the Committee on Standards in Public Life produced, it was 108 pages, so it's incredibly long, incredibly detailed, and a huge amount of work went into that. Within their report, the committee found evidence that supported the view that the vast majority of councillors and officers maintain incredibly high standards of conduct. They did find that there was clear evidence of misconduct by some councillors, and the majority of these cases related to bullying or harassment, other disruptive behaviour, so similar to what this committee has seen in the past with some of our complaints. They also felt that there was evidence of a persistent or repeated misconduct in a very small minority of councillors. So as our chair has already said, they took recommendations. There were 24 of them in total. They made them to government. They went to specific groups, public office holders. And they were looking at a number of changes to the primary legislation. We talked regularly at this committee, we were hoping that the changes would take place. And one of them, the biggie that our previous chairman talked about, was this, the sanction of suspending a member for up to 6 months. And of course, it would have been subject to changes in legislation. We thought that was going to happen. We've been waited with bated breath here at this in this committee, and we talked about finally having teeth to our kind of toothless sanctions that we have at this moment in time. We've waited, and as we've already touched upon, there were various events. We had Brexit, we then went into pandemic, and it delayed the response that we've been waiting for. But we have had it back. It came in March, and as my report says, it does read as highly disappointing, because we're not going to get those teeth that we were much waiting and anticipating. So there were 24 recommendations that went through to the government, and they've responded upon those recommendations. I'm not going to take you through all of them because my report was long. It was long for me. I don't like long reports, even as a lawyer. But what I will do is I will pick out some of those that we were hoping for and that this committee talked about. And I will very briefly say what the government came back, with their response and the detail of that. So I will go to, I think it was recommendation 2, and this has come up actually, not so much at this committee, but from councillors asking me the question. What they wanted, the government, this is recommendation 2 that came from the report. The government should ensure that candidates standing for or accepting public offices are not required publicly to disclose their home address. Now it comes up at nomination time. It also comes up when we talk about what goes on the ballot papers. And this particular recommendation talks about your registrable interests that I keep, and they are placed online. And what they wanted to do, they wanted an amendment to clarify that a councillor does not need to register their home address on the register of interest, the one that is held by myself, but also is in the public domain. So it goes out on our website. This has obviously come from some of the shocking and awful horrific crimes that our politicians have unfortunately been, that have taken place. And there has been concern with regard to our local councillors, parish and also district councillors as well, with regard to having their address out in the public domain. The government has said in their response, and I do know that this particular issue is coming up potentially in governance and through the governance committee, so it's something that we will be considering for our councillors here at the district. The government came back that the government will engage with interested parties on the best means to ensure that candidates, so those going for nomination, and councillors are not required publicly to disclose their home address. Now, the relevant authorities regulations 2012 state that you should. That's the contention here. So to be lawful, all members should be disclosing their home address. Now, there can be dispensations given, and that's through myself, and I have done so for certain members. But this is all members that they were asking for this to be clarified. And the government has said that they will engage, they haven't committed, but they are saying in their comment and their response, notwithstanding, it is important that home addresses are internally registered with monitoring officers in order for us to help deal with conflicts of interest. So whether that's giving us a little bit of discretion here as a council, whether it would be right for, as long as I have them, and I have them in order to check for conflicts of interest, and whether that's sufficient is something that we could potentially look at. But as the regulations stand, those home addresses should be in the public domain, and they will be remaining in the public domain. That's what the government has come back saying. So yes, watch this space. We will see. We will see what happens. Then I wanted to just pick out recommendation 5. They wanted again the same regulation, the relevant authorities regulation 2012, to be amended to include the terms unpaid directorship, trusteeships, management roles in a charity or body of a public nature, to be added to our register of interest. They wanted that changed, and they wanted the regulation changed. And the reason for that was because it reflects the language we use in the model code. So it would be clearer, and the regulation would use the language and have the same expectation as the code, our model code that we have chosen to adopt. Again, the government will keep this matter under review, so they have no immediate plans to amend those regulations. So that's on 2 recommendations. They've come back saying it's unlikely to change. There was a recommendation, and I will mention this because it does affect the independent person. They wanted, the recommendation was put forward that under the Localism Act, it should be amended to require that the independent persons were appointed for a fixed term of 2 years only, and renewable once. And I'm quite pleased with this one because they didn't accept that. And we have struggled in the past to find independent persons. They're quite difficult, and it is, that there aren't many of them. And in the past, we've been asked if we can either share or, and again, neighbouring authorities do share their independent persons. And they've said it's actually that it's up for us to decide. And they've left that within our hands, which I'm quite pleased because I think we would potentially struggle. Recommendation 10, and we talk about the teeth that we were expecting. A local authority should only be able to suspend a councillor. This talks about suspending, and if it was proportionate, and a proportionate sanction. And they've kind of grouped them together with their reply. This is again whether councillors should be given a right to appeal to the local government ombudsman if the local authority imposes a period of suspension. So again, it's part of whether we were going to be allowed to suspend councillors. And the local government, it was a recommendation 14 that the local government ombudsman should be given the power to investigate and decide upon an allegation of a code of conduct breach by a councillor and the appropriate sanction, an appeal by a councillor who had a suspension being imposed. And so it gave the councillor, which there isn't the right of an appeal now. They were recommending that the ombudsman gave the councillor, subject to a suspension, a right of appeal. And then this big one, recommendation 16, the one that we were really hoping for and we really felt would help as a deterrent, local authorities to be given the power to suspend councillors without allowances for up to 6 months. The government came back, They will engage with sector representatives and bodies of councillors and officers of all tiers of local government. They will seek views on options to strengthen sanctions to address breaches of the code, which fall below the bar of criminal activity. But that's all they're prepared to do at this moment in time. So we didn't get the suspension that we hoped. So it is disappointing. Again, there's just a couple more that might be of interest to this committee. And again, there were 24, so and I'm conscious of your time. Recommendation 18, they asked for the criminal offences in the Localism Act relating to those disclosable pecuniary interest, again, that go on your register of interest. They wanted that to be abolished. And they came back saying the high bar of police involvement was served to discourage politically motivated and unfounded complaints. So they are keen for that to stay. And actually, I think rightfully so. So I agree with the government on that one. And then they did ask that the Localism Act should be amended to state that parish councils must adopt the code of conduct of the principal authority, again, with necessary amendments of the new code. So we will be looking at one. We've talked about that. There was a time when we had numerous, within the parish councils, we had numerous code of conduct that we had to look at and sift through and note the changes, because they were bespokely written across the district, really, and it did make things more troublesome when it came to looking at whether a code of conduct, a breach had actually happened. And we were hoping that would be the case. They have come back with, there will be many instances where a parish council may want to add to the code of their principal authority. So they are allowing that bespoke element to stay there and that discretion to stay. As Robert has already updated this committee on, we are really lucky in that it sounds like only three of our parish councils haven't adopted the same code as us. So we're almost there, but it would have been nice to have seen something that would have compelled them. But again, that's not likely to happen, and certainly not at this stage. So those are the ones that I've picked out. Whether there are any questions or any recommendations within the report, I'm mindful that it is long. But we were waiting so patiently, and we were expecting so much more. So it is with disappointment, but there are some responses that I feel are right. And it's been helpful to update the committee on, I think. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sharon. Yes, it is very interesting to see how very few, or if none, of the recommendations have been taken on board by the government, and to see their reasons for that. In particular, the recommendation that we were possibly hoping for as a committee, that we would have a power to suspend a councillor for breach of the code of conduct for 6 months, is considered, I think, by the government to possibly have undesirable consequences on the right to freedom of speech. And they say that all councillors are ultimately held to account via the ballot box. So that's the ultimate sanction that should be relied on. So we have to battle on without that particular sanction in our armoury. Does anyone have any questions or comments they'd like to raise about the report that the monitoring officer has run through? Yes, Councillor Utan.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just say that I recognise the difficulty of the recommendation concerning basically planning committees. I've highlighted it. Do you know the one I mean? Hold on, where am I? It's about pecuniary interests and knowledge of of knowledge, and it's the one that always causes problems at planning.
Recommendation 7.
Yeah. Yes. Must not participate in a discussion or vote in a matter considered if they have any interest whether registered or not. When it says registered, we are referring definitely to the supernumerary, aren't we? Yes, okay, fine, thank you.
Does anyone else have any comments they'd like to make? Yes, Councillor Waters.
Sorry, yes, it's about the listing of people's addresses, really. I mean, I'm quite disappointed with that they haven't been able to act quickly. On a personal level, you know, I'm having to disclose my mother's address, which is a bit unfair, really. So any pressure that can be brought on the government to follow that through, or any way that we feel that we can find a loophole to address it internally, I think we should pursue that.
I think the monitoring officer did say that she has some discretion to not publish the addresses in particular circumstances. Certainly on the council website, some councillors don't put their addresses and some do. Some use the council offices as their contact address, but we are here talking about the register of disclosable interests, aren't we? That's what we're talking about, where there is a requirement to put your address. But I think the monitoring officer does have power to dispense with the requirement for disclosure. Have I understood that correctly?
Yes, Chair. Yes, you have.
Any other points for anyone? Okay. Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much for taking us through that rather long, complicated response from the government. I think that the minutes just require us to consider it, which we have done. Thank you. Sorry, I should say that again because I didn't have my microphone on. We're now moving on to agenda item 10, which is to receive a standards update from the monitoring officer. And I think we may have some good news from on that.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to hand over to one of my deputies. So I've got, for the committee and those that aren't aware, I have 2 of my deputies here, deputy monitoring officers, that are authorised to act when I'm not here, but they also help me and assist me, particularly with standards. So I've got Robert Bassendale and I've got Lauren Kelly. I'm going to hand over. I would love to take this moment to say this update to this committee, but I won't be selfish, and I'm going to hand it over to Robert, who will give you an update, a standards update as to what we're up to and what we've got going on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, in effect, we've got no current outstanding cases, which is the first time we've ever been able to report that. We have previously reported on total number of complaints in the calendar year of 2021. Today, I'll just give details of total complaints in effect for the financial year of 2021-2022. So it's from 1st of April 21 to 31st of March 22. There was a total of 34 code of conduct complaints made within that financial year. Out of those, 26 related to Stennington Parish Council, 3 related to Horsham District Councillors, 2 West Chiltington Parish Council, and then it's 1 each for Henfield Parish Council, Nuthurst Parish Council, and Storrington and Sullington Parish Council. So it was a total of 34 for the financial year 2021 to 2022, and that is, as far as I'm aware, the highest we've had, certainly the highest that we've had in the 4 or 5 years that I've been around. This year, we've had just one complaint. It was received on 9th of May. It related to Storrington and Sellington Parish Council. It has been assessed and dealt with under the new procedure in dealing with complaints. No further action. It was felt that there was no breach, which leaves us with no current cases as of today. Would just like to add that what the model code of conduct that we brought in last year and the new procedure in dealing with complaints assists us greatly with how we deal with complaints. It's much easier to assess, deal with, and progress the complaints. So the work that we did last year is really helping us as and when we receive new complaints. Obviously, the Steding Parish Council ones, that there is the individual and separate action that you've heard about earlier today from the monitoring officer. But yes, it's the first time ever we've got no current cases.
Thank you very much. That is very, very good news. I was just going to ask roughly how many of the complaints that have been disposed of have been dealt with under the new complaints procedure, because we only adopted that, didn't we, in December 2021?
Indeed. In effect, there's only been a couple because some of them were Steding ones, which I'd say we've not gone through the whole process. So yeah, in effect, there's just 2 cases that have been dealt with under the new process.
And how many of the Steding complaints have been suspended rather than obviously just because they're going to be dealt with under the new process with Hoey and Scoff? How many of those have gone into abeyance?
In effect, there was around 15 that were outstanding when we went into the review procedure. Out of those 15, there were 4 or 5 that had gone to investigation, but there was around a total of 15.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Robert, for that summary. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask about the current situation on complaints, which is a good position to be in, I think, and would take out of a lot of pressure from the monitoring officer and from this department. Yes, Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Chairman. As a relative newbie to this committee, but equally someone that's gone through the Code of Conduct and the recent changes to the Code of Conduct in finite detail, I'll be quite interested to hear what the benefits have been of the latest Code of Conduct. That's okay.
One that we're now all working from the same model code of conduct, so it doesn't matter in effect what parish council it is. We're, other than I think it is like we say 3, and some of them are neighbourhood councils that haven't actually adopted the new model code of conduct, and we are working with them on that. So it's knowing that we're all working from exactly the same document. There's also very good guidance that's come out that accompanies the new model code of conduct, and again reference back to that makes it much easier. And then our whole procedure that we painstakingly went through again makes it much easier to actually deal with the cases. We obviously involve the independent person very early, and we can basically sift through the cases that need to be dealt with quickly, and there's plenty of different options that we can actually take with the new process and procedure, and it's made it much easier.
Can I respond to that? I think as a council we should be delighted, and it be noted that the fact that we took on board all these changes under the recent Code of Conduct has made this very important job so much easier, and the process is so much easier to follow. And the fact that we've got buy-in from so many of the parish councils and hopefully all of the neighbourhood councils has improved the process of dealing with these complaints so swiftly. I know there was some debate about bringing the latest code of conduct in, and I still feel that it needs slight tweaking, but I think the major improvements that we have now heard has had a significant impact on the ability of the staff and this committee to deal with those complaints so swiftly.
Thank you, Councillor Walters, for those words. And I think it is, yes, a very positive thing that we've got this new code of conduct, and we have also streamlined our complaints procedure to make it much easier for people to understand and to follow, and gives us further, more options to deal with complaints, which perhaps leads on to another point that I just would like to mention, which is on training, potential training on the new code of conduct and the complaints procedure. And I think, Sharon, I think you had a word to say about that. If I could hand over to you, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've been considering what we would normally do with our standards training is we wait for the new for the election for new councillors. But I don't think, and again, we will discuss further, the chair and myself, but I think it would be a good idea for this committee to have some training and to have it as soon as we can, really. And if we feel that the training is adequate, which I'm sure it will be, we can then put that out to new members, and it will go across we'll have that training for next year. But there is training out there, and there's a couple of chambers that we will approach, but I think it will be helpful. We've got a new model code that we're looking at. There is new language, there are new terms. We still talk about prejudicial within this council, prejudicial interests. The language again that we use in the code and that's been adopted and gone into our constitution now is different. We also have, as Robert has already said, we have some really good guidance, and I think there are kind of, the best way to describe it, scenarios within the guidance that help you to determine conduct and behaviour and whether true breaches have actually taken place. So the kind of ground, it's changed slightly. It's certainly changed, and I think it would be a good time for us to instigate and facilitate some training. And then with a view to, obviously for our learning and for this committee and our decision making, but with a view to then putting out to all members if we feel that that's right. So again, it is for this committee to decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. I think it would be certainly, we should consider it, opening it up to all members of the council to have the training, and possibly even, I don't know, parish council members as well. I think we did once before, didn't we? We had quite a large session with the barristers that were dealing with the training. So we will have a word about that and see what we can come up with. So that brings us to the last item on the agenda, which is urgent business. I don't have any further items to consider. Does anyone else have anything they want to bring up? So on that basis, I'm going to declare the meeting closed at, I think it's, what are we? 10:50. 10:50. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.